unless you have been living under a rock, or maybe inside a Wi-Fi dead panic room. You've probably noticed something weird about the news. Doesn't matter where you are, Berlin, Boston, Barcelona, same headlines, same talking points, same breaking footage recycled like stale leftovers. The tone? Always calibrated. The flavor? Think of it like processed cheese. Smooth, plastic, and suspiciously shelf stable. It fills you up without telling you anything. This is also where it gets interesting. What most people don't realize is that this isn't just some natural byproduct of globalization or digital speed. It's engineered, orchestrated. There are hands, very real, very powerful hands, behind the curtain turning this global information symphony. And spoiler, they're not journalists. They're not elected, and they don't particularly care what you believe within a certain spectrum, as long as it keeps you compliant, divided, and perfectly manageable. Now, for those of you who still read, actually read, either out of stubbornness, curiosity, or maybe just a suspicion that something's been really off for a long time, I wrote a full expose about the Americanisation of global news. In it, I explore the hidden mergers, the hostile takeovers, and the power that Pentagon-aligned media conglomerates have over your news. All the names, the mergers, including the most recent one, the war rooms, the shareholder fingerprints, dates, documents, filings, quotes, and every single claim backed by references and sources. Time is short, I get it, that's not your fault, it's by design too. The entire media landscape runs on dopamine loops and thumb fatigue. So for those whose attention span's been algorithmically shortened, I made this softer, easy accessible video version. Not as a substitute for reading my expose, I still hope you read it, but as a spark, because if you won't read what they don't want you to read, then you'll end up believing what they do want you to believe. So let's try to cut through this all. Media power is being consolidated, streamlined, and locked behind two names you've never voted for: BlackRock and Vanguard. Not editors, not journalists, asset managers. If you think they are competing, think again. They are coordinating. One fund to control CNN, another one for Fox. One foot in NATO's PR arm, the other one in Netflix boardroom. And you are flipping channels thinking you're making choices. So forget the logos. The logos are their costumes. It's Comcast, Warner, Disney, all reshuffled like a deck of cards owned by the same two hands. Different anchors, same script. Different accents, same silence when it matters. And lobbying, that's not just a side business, it's the engine. Comcast buys legislation the way it buys networks, prepackaged and quiet. And those think tanks quoted like scripture, they're not independent. They are paid to stay inside the predetermined narratives. And Europe, they're not exempt either. Brussels isn't fighting back, it's scheduling meetings. American firms write the rulebook, then thank the Commission for its cooperation. What you get is the illusion of disagreement inside a cage of consensus. The watchdogs have a master. And when something threatens that master's portfolio, the story gets filtered, softened, or even shelved. And there's no need for the proverbial memo. Everyone already knows what gets them fired. So no, you're not informed, you are managed. Here's the part that should keep us all up at night. War, collapse, censorship, civil unrest even, all repackaged and narrated like a documentary for bored teenagers. Neutral tone, authoritative cadence, no visible fingerprints. Let's take Ukraine for example. Day one, unprovoked invasion. That phrase didn't pop up organically. It landed everywhere at once. New York Times, BBC, Reuters, Le Monde, even Al Jazeera English. wired in by the same US foreign policy vocabulary, pre-approved by defense briefings and piped into newsrooms across the world. Gaza? It's never described as what it is, an occupation. Never. The frame is always escalation, cycle of violence, or retaliation. The occupier became the defender. The bombed became the terrorists. Civilians erased, statistics manipulated. And if you question the framing, you're either anti-Semitic or a security threat that needs to be silenced. Remember Iraq in 2003? Same blueprint. Weapons of mass destruction, regime change, shock and awe. 1 million dead. 500,000 Iraqi children starved to death, which Madeleine Albright found justified. Imagine. No accountability, no consequences. The architects write opinion columns and teach journalism. Yep, and they've even now got your preferred influencers too. I've reported on this last week. Hand-fed narratives dropped into casual posts about nail polish and cafe latte, disguised as opinion, timed to trend before you even realize you're being fucked. And the influencers? Well, they don't need a briefing room. They've got their brand deals. Lucrative brand deals. They sell consent the same way they sell skincare, with lightening, filters and the illusion of authenticity. Most claim not that they don't know who's actually paying for this collaboration. Some do, of course, and don't care. Because when the paycheck clears, the algorithm smiles and another war gets its aesthetics. The language is always clean. Targeted strikes, kinetic operations, collateral damage, the right of self-defense. There's never screaming, never smoke, never blood. Just clinical verbs and low-resolution maps, all designed to keep your pulse low and your questions vague. What gets buried? Well, arms deals, private contractors, surveillance programs, the permanent military footprint, 950 plus bases in more than 70 countries, but somehow that's never the story. Why? Because it breaks the spell. Immersions of Death 2.0, also published recently. I investigate who is setting the frame. Links in the description. But narrative control isn't just about what gets said. It's about pacing, timing, making sure the headlines switch just fast enough to avoid reflection. You're meant to forget Gaza by the time Taiwan trends. You're supposed to hear escalation and never ask who is actually escalating. And the wire services? They're the backbone. AP, Reuters, Agence France Presse, syndicated text poured into every national outlet. Local editors copy-paste. They don't have the budget or the resources to double-check, let alone to push back. So when you hear the same 5 adjectives describing 3 different wars across 5 continents, that's no longer journalism, that's branding. It's trash sold as truth. Meanwhile, the local news gets executed. Clean, quiet, corporate style. First came the acquisitions, then the layoffs, then the syndication contracts, and just like that, cities with 200 years of independent reporting now recycle press releases from across the Atlantic. In France, entire regions went dark when corporate owners cut staff and centralized operations. In Spain, local outlets were bought, gutted and turned into shells for international wire content. Portugal, same story. Fewer reporters, more pre-written copy translated from Reuters or AFP. Even the UK, birthplace of public service journalism, isn't immune. Think Fox News. Local papers either collapsed or got rolled into ad farms. London calls it streamlining. Glasgow called it we haven't had a real reporter in 5 years. What people don't realize is that most of the local reporting you read is actually outsourced, or worse, automated. AI is rewriting wire copy. Interns, if they still have interns, are tasked with pasting NATO press briefings under fake bylines. Coverage without context. Headlines without memory. Ask a local editor, ask any local editor how they decide what to run. The answer? Whatever fits the feed. It's all about impressions, search engine optimization, and not surprisingly, the wrong corporate owner. So if the scandals stay hidden, if facial recognition, for example, goes live without debate, if your city starts behaving like a satellite office for Washington, that's not because people don't care. It's because no one's left to warn them. The journalistic watchdog is gone. What's left is just a megaphone. Speaking of which, what about the regulators? You'd think regulators would slow this down. Well, they didn't. They greased the wheels. FCC, EU Commission, they call it oversight. But all they really do is sign the paperwork and smile for the press conference. Every single major media merger approved. Every transatlantic acquisition waved through. The only conditions: a couple of vague promises about diversity or public interest. Then nothing. No audits, no follow-ups, just deregulation disguised as modernization. Let's start with the FCC. Its revolving door with telecom giants spin faster than the fastest news cycle, on purpose. One day you are regulating Comcast, next day you're on its payroll. Net neutrality died the same way, death by lobbyists. In the EU, the playbook's very similar. American firms flood the transparency register with lobbyists, then sit down with commissioners to negotiate the very laws meant to regulate them. Talking about revolving door or circular argument. Meanwhile, local media laws, the kind that used to protect regional outlets from being swallowed, get quietly harmonized. The result? US firms walk into Europe like it's an open bazaar. Buy cheap, cut stuff, syndicate, monetize. Now, you try filing a complaint. You'll be routed through 10 layers of legalese only to find the oversight body is funded by, you guessed it right, the very same companies it's supposed to monitor. So the regulators weren't outmaneuvered. They were on board from the start, not watchdogs, shopping guides for the powerful. And that's, my friends, is just the surface. Entertainment is where the real conversion happens. And it doesn't shout, it seduces. Let's start with Hollywood. America's propaganda producer number one. Hollywood sells more than stories. It sells norms. The hero is always from the US. The villain speaks with an accent, preferably a Russian or Chinese one these days. Military tech is cool. Surveillance is justified. Capitalism is freedom. Every plotline calibrated, every worldview branded. And it scales. Disney owns Marvel. Marvel owns box office weekends. Netflix runs soft power ops at global scale with diverse casts for sure, but the values are carbon copied. Individualism, consumerism, moral clarity enforced by force. It's soft power that doesn't feel like power, which makes it work even better. Why is this a problem? Well, think about what these stories erase. Labor exploitation, not a theme. Foreign policy critique, nothing. The system as a villain, never. The message is simple. Problems are personal. They're your problems. They're not structural. Violence is redemptive. Dissent is chaos. And then, of course, there's the merging of news and entertainment, which has become the anesthetic of our age. News entertainment merger. Political satire that mocks symptoms, never causes. Late night hosts grinning like trained poodles, turning public outrage into punchlines so the audience leaves laughing instead of thinking. You laugh, you nod and move on. Nothing changes. And in Europe? Well, I can tell you, if you think in Europe things are much better, think again. Streaming platforms flood national markets with US content. Local shows get out-budgeted, sidelined or rewritten to fit American pacing. Anna Chen, a former BBC producer, can tell you everything about it. Even algorithmic curation favors the same ideological rhyme. Bingeable, profitable, apolitical. The link is in the description. This is where hegemony really hides. In jokes, in edits, in soundtracks, in stereotyped heroes like the blonde and blue-eyed Jesus Christ. You don't notice it, you internalize it. Until critic sounds like aggression and compliance feels like freedom. Let's look at the hidden masters. This is the part they don't even try to hide anymore. If content is the product, finance is the puppeteer. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. 3 names that show up in shareholder lists across every single media empire, tech firm, weapons contractor, and energy giant. You virtually can throw it out at the Fortune 500 without hitting one of them, even if you do it blinded. Why does this matter? Because they don't just own stocks, they own leverage, board seats, voting power. Their portfolios shape the incentives, keep ratings up, avoid controversy, push growth narratives, and most importantly, never question the national security narrative. You want a story on military corruption? Better not tangle Lockheed's stock price. Want to dig into fossil fuel lobbying? Check how much of your parent company is held by Exxon investors. That's another form of portfolio management. The effect is subtle but surgical. Risk-averse editors, bland headlines, off-limit topics. Finance doesn't have to call newsrooms. Well, sometimes they do, but mostly it's just adjusting the thermostat. And the irony? These same firms fund philanthropic journalism grants, believe it or not. Foundations that preach independence while reporting to the same asset managers driving extractive capitalism. That's the play. Keep the lights on with one hand and shape the shadows with the other. And the situation in Europe? Poor Europe. It once believed it was immune. That its legacy press, public broadcasters, and proud linguistic patchwork somehow formed a natural defense. But that illusion shattered. And when it did, American media didn't just seep in, it flooded through the breach, carrying with it the language, the logic, and the loyalties of empire. And the languages? Well, Reuters, AP, CNN International. They don't merely report, they standardize reality. Their phrasing becomes the template, their tone the global default. By the time it's translated in Berlin, Rome, or Madrid, the story's already been domesticated. Same lead sentence, same framing, only the byline that has changed. Then came the platforms. Google, Meta, Amazon. I've reported on them before. The infrastructure that decides what you see, when, and in what order. And every tweak to the algorithm pushes national media closer to US tempo, US conflict cycles, and US moral framing. When you then add Netflix and Discovery Plus, the game is over. European kids now grow up fluent in Marvel timelines and clueless about their own national histories. American culture supplies the myth, the morals, and the villains. Their political imagination is outsourced. US debates became their compass, and dissent gets graded into imported metrics. Even the language of resistance arrives prepackaged. None of it is native. All of it is adhesive. Politico Europe, owned by Axel Springer. Axel Springer, which is also owned by KKR, which in turn has deep ties to US intelligence and military contracting. That's narrative export with press credentials. And what gets exported is sanitized. Israel is defending, of course. China is threatening, also clear. The US is concerned, rinse and repeat. Every conflict processed through American optics. Local nuance? Too slow, too complicated, doesn't scale. So the continent that once warned against colonialization is now fully digitized, anglicized, and algorithmically harmonized. What once sold sugary soda through Coca-colonialization now sells submission. Welcome to the new Atlanticism, brought to you by Silicon Valley servers, Wall Street money, and Pentagon partnerships disguised as shared values. So, now that we have seen the machinery exposed, ask yourself this: how much longer will you let them Coca-colonize your mind and call it freedom? If you made it this far, something in you already knows this isn't just about media. It's about consent, memory, and the quiet surrender of our inner voices. We didn't lose truth all at once. We bartered it away, headline by headline, click by click, until the map replaced the territory and the algorithm replaced attention. Another spoiler: what I wrote on Substack isn't comfort reading. It's a mirror held up to that trade. It names the brokers, traces the fingerprints, and shows how American myth-making became the operating system of global thought. So all I can do now is to recommend to read it. Not because I wrote it, not because I want you to agree, but because to reclaim the part of you that still wants to see, truly see. Because once you understand how narratives are built, you stop being raw material for someone else's story.